Sizzix. Now, you probably know by now that we've got a great hookup with those three companies. And if you go to our website, check out availability because they have been extremely popular. So we do have a range of each of those products, and all of those products, of course, come from Mr. Tim Holtz, or rather come from the imagination of Mr. Tim Holtz. So the reason we brought them in is because they work so well with our Tim Holtz dies and embossing folders and Impresslits and all of those wonderful items that you love so much. So let's crack on, shall we? As I said, we're making a collage, and I'm starting just with a piece of ivory cardstock. Now, I want to apply colour to that, and I'm going to do that in a couple of ways. The first is by applying some ink to my craft mat, and I'm going to use, so that was old paper. I'm also adding some weathered wood and what the heck, a bit of pumice stone for good luck. Now, spritz, this is the distress sprayer, and I'm just going to activate that. I'm not spraying on too much water. That's quite important at this stage because I want to get a different effect. So I want to see the big pieces like that. I want to see the little splatters, and I want to see these large, almost soaked areas as well. So I can drag this, I can dip it, I can do all sorts of things. That's just one way of making your cardstock look aged. So this make is quite a vintage make. So let's put that to one side, dry off the mat, and bring it back in. At this point, I'm taking my Sizzix heat tool, and I'm going to have it on the top setting. Now you'll notice when you apply water to cardstock, it does tend to warp. Don't worry about that, we can even that warping out by drying both sides. There we are, you see it's starting to settle down now. So simply turn it over, dry the back as well. And we're getting there. So, that was on the second heat setting of my tool. Now, I'm going to bring in some wild honey. I adore this colour, and I use it a lot when I'm doing a vintage make. It just adds a bit of warmth to it. So a bit more weathered wood, I think, in there. And activate with the water. Again, this time I'm applying just a little bit more. You can see there's more water in there. And let's take this and pick out some of those areas. That, oh, lovely. That's what I'm looking for. There you go. And one more for luck. So that is looking good thus far. Let's dry that off. And now you can take your heat tool to that. You can dab away some of the colour. You can leave it as it is. You can leave it to air dry. It's a very different effect. But I'm going to take my heat tool again. And it has a dual setting, as I say. So if you want to dry very delicate watercolours without blowing the colour around, you get this first setting. See, it's a low heat, but it doesn't push the air out so much, so it's perfect for watercolours. If you want to use embossing powders, or if you want to use shrink plastic, the high setting is best. So that is almost ready to go. What I want to do now, this time, I'm going to be using these distress inks in a different way. I'm using my blending tool, and this is old paper, and you see I'm moving from the outside in. I don't want to leave those marks on the edges, so I'm taking it very, very careful. And this gives it a lovely vintage edge. So we're going around. Take your time with this. We're in no rush, are we, folks? No, absolutely not. So we'll bring that in. And you can see already. And the best way to see the difference, that's without the old paper, that's with the old paper. So we can see the contrast there against the ivory card, and that's the colour that we started with. So I'm going to continue round, and it sort of unifies everything as well. All these colours we put on, it brings it together, it unifies it, and there we are. So I've gone quite a way into the cardstock. Now I'm going to take off that foam. And this time I'm going to go in with a darker colour, which is Vintage Photo. Now Vintage Photo is a very warm brown, dark brown but very warm, we also have Walnut Stain, which is a much darker colour. It's probably one of my favourites actually, but it doesn't give you this lovely warmth. So we'll just kiss the edges now. We're not going too far into the card. And we'll keep that going all the way around. So this will give us a lovely contrast when we place the rectangle of card back against the plain ivory cardstock. So that should just be enough. Now, where I've come in with the brown, with the old paper and the vintage photo, something I might want to do is add some mottling to the edges. And the way to do that is to take my spritzer tool, just come in there and let that dry. And you can see here, these edges, see how they're starting to mottle, how that water is reacting with the ink there. Again, it's giving it that kind of vintage, careworn vibe that we love so much. Now, let's dry off my craft mat. So I'm going to pick some of that colour away. When you use a paper towel, incidentally, as opposed to air drying or drying it with a heat tool, it picks away more of the pigment, so you get a very different feeling. So 3 different ways to let these dry. You can pick it away with a paper towel, you can air dry, or you can heat set as I'm doing now. So we'll just finish it off with the heat tool. And that's it. So that's a lovely vintage background. And let's take a look again against the ivory. You wouldn't believe that 5 minutes ago that was the same colour. And you see this edging as well, how it gives you that lovely contrast. Now, one of the companies we've tied up with is Stampers Anonymous, of course. That is the stamping company of choice for Mr. Tim Holtz. And this is one of Tim's sets. This is called Faded Type. Hopefully you'll find this on the website. And I'm going to take a couple of these stamps. Now, what I'll do is I'll place it onto this little backing here, and I'm going to apply some distress inks to that. Now, people might not think of distress inks to use for stamping, but they do work very well. They give you quite a unique finish, very different to stamping with pigment or solvent inks. And that's the finish that we're going for today. So I'm going in with pumice stone, a little bit of weathered wood, and I'm going to come somewhere around here. Now I'm looking for imperfection. I don't expect this to be absolutely perfect. That's what I want. It's creating that background. It's mixing with the colours in the background. It's just sitting there. It's sort of, I like to call it interference. Now, I'm using this one as well, but I'm going in with vintage photo. Now, rather than apply this, because I'm going for the imperfection, I don't even need to use my stamp block this time. I'm just coming in like so. So that's the vintage photo, and I'm going to go over the top of the other one. There, just like that. That's all. That's all you need, folks. There we are. So that's really taken on a lovely vintage vibe now. Now, what are we going to do with this? Well, we're going to add all our other elements. And first of all, I'm going to use an Impresslits die. This is called Holly Berries. This is designed by Tim Holtz. And the best way to do Impresslits is to take your card and spritz it with some clean water. What that does is it softens the card and it allows these fibres to stretch. But what you will find is it gives you very rich, deep detail. Very important. It's quite a difference using this technique than if you were just using plain old card. And I'm going to take the base of my platform and I'm going to only use one cutting plate. Only ever need one with Impresslits. Now, I'll run it through, but to get the depth that we want, and the same goes for 3D embossing folders, I'm going to run it back again. That will allow the fibres in the card to stretch, and it will give me a much deeper, much richer emboss at the end of the day. So let's take that out now, put my big shot to one side. Now, check out the detail in this. How about that? I'll move that around a little in the light so Josh can pick the detail out there. There we are. Now, it looks great as it is, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some gilding waxes and I'm going to apply these to that strip. I always like to take a sticky note lid like this, especially when because I want a very subtle effect. If I put my finger in there and just go straight on there, I might have blobs. It might be thick in some places, thin in others. So I'm using this as a kind of a palette. So I'm taking most of that off there before applying. And you'll notice as well, I've gone to another one which I prepared earlier, because rather than let that dry, which isn't great TV, folks. This is one that I made earlier, which I've allowed to dry. And I'm going in there, you see how subtle that is. It's not in your face, it's not full on. I haven't used too much gilding wax, just enough. The key is, as with anything, particularly the analogy I always use is salt in cooking. You can always add more, but you can never take it away. It's the same with gilding wax and so many other techniques that we adore as makers. And there we are. So that's a kind of a bronze colour. And now I'm going to come in with silver just to pick out some detail. And people might think that silver and bronze wouldn't necessarily go together. Well, we're here, my friends, to prove differently. So we'll go over the top there, and that's it. So the best way, incidentally, the best way to get this off your fingers, it comes up pretty easy anyway, but the best way is with alcohol wipes or alcohol hand solution, and there's plenty of that about at the moment, I think we'll agree. Now, there, we've got that. We're going to put that to one side. Next thing I want, now this is a piece of corrugated card, which I tore, and then I used a brayer. So this is my brayer with some white acrylic or just some white paint. You can use distress paint, picket fence, that's great. And I applied it to that, so it's taken on a sort of a snowy background effect. And I'm going to take some twine, this is thin twine, and I'll pick off the backing using my tweezers. I love these Sizzix tweezers, I love the angle of them, but I love the fact that I can use them as both a pokey tool and something to pick the backing off 3D foam pads or double-sided tape like this. I'm going to come in, I'm just going to wrap that around once. And then once more. So we've got it crisscrossing in the center there. Don't wrap it around too tightly, or what you'll find is it distorts and bends the card. So there we have it. I'll take my Sizzix scissors from the paper sculpting kit and just snip that edge. So that's another thing we're going to put to one side. So we're building this up as we go along. Those are three elements that we've got. Next, my friends, I want to alert your attention to this wonderful set that has been with us for some time, actually. So the stamps are called Ticket Booth, and you see there's all these wonderful vintage tickets. Now you can buy separately a set of dies which crop these absolutely perfectly. Point in fact, there we are. How about that one there? And you've got that dotted, perforated line as well. So which one I'm going to choose? I'm going to choose this one today. And I'm going to stamp now. Here's a piece of card which I prepared earlier. Remember all those lovely colours we were going for? I want to stamp on top of this. This is a little bit richer than the previous one in terms of the colours. I'm going to take that and I'm going to look for a nice area on which to stamp that. I'm going to go in with my vintage photo as before. That's fine. Let's pick out. I kind of like it there. There we are. So we'll stamp that in place. So you see, it's quite muted. If I use black, it would be a very different vibe. So I've gone with a more muted tone, and I'm going to place my framelit die just so. Now, one of the problems we have, of course, with dies like this, which need to register, is that inevitably they will slide and slip about when we put them through our machine. That's where Sizzix Maker's tape comes in. It's a very low-tack tape, and it allows you to register your dies perfectly. So we'll go back to our platform, we'll place that in there, sandwich it between the two cutting plates, place it onto the platform and run it through our machine. The machine I'm using today, no doubt familiar with this, is the classic Big Shot. This machine has been around, goodness me, since 2005. Never really changed in that time because it hasn't needed to, because it's reliable, it's durable, and there are over, and I keep saying this, but it's always good to remind you, over 2 million of these machines in the hands of makers all around the world. Quite a club. There we are. So I'm going to go around the edges with my vintage photo, and again this is going to give me the contrast. So when I place it, the thing with when you're juggling lots of elements like this, it can look a bit of a dog's dinner. So what we want to ensure is that we get that contrast, so that when they go together you can see each individual element, but they don't stick out like a sore thumb. And if I put that against there, you can see how using that vintage photo around the edge has really made all the difference. And that looks like an old faded ticket. So there is another element. We'll put that to one side. Now, it's festive, so let's have a snowflake. And this, my friends, is a stunning snowflake. Literally, it's from a set. There are two in the set. It's called Stunning Snowflake. It's by Mr. Tim Holtz. And I have cut this snowflake from Ivory Glitter Card, which is part of our Sizzix Opulent range. So again, that's another one. We'll put it to one side. And I'm thinking, you know what, let's get some smaller snowflakes. Now for that, I've die cut again from the Silver Glitter Card, the Opulent range. I've used the Arctic die. Now this is another one. This is a Tim Holtz Chapter 3 lawn. You can see there's the card, so that makes a great background. And here are a couple of cards which I've done using that die. Different vibe, great backgrounds, but of course you can also use this as a stencil through which to ink through, or as I'm doing today, you can use the little snowflakes that come out of that as well. Now, last thing, Idea-ology. They make some of the most wonderful little findings and trinkets and so on and so forth. This comes from the Adornments Christmas Words set. And what I've done, you can see, I've applied some white acrylic to that and rubbed it in to where the letters are recessed or embossed there. And I've rubbed it in, left a little bit of white on the top. That's going to add to our whole festive vibe. And I'll take, this is the same twine as we used before. There's a good reason for that. And I'm going to just thread that through the hole. There are umpteen ways to use and to apply colour to these wonderful findings. And if you go to timholtz.com, he's the master. He will show you exactly how to get the best out of these. So, without further ado, shall we start putting this together? There's my background, and here is my corrugated card piece. There is double-sided tape on the back, but I'm going to use something else. I'm going to use my old friend. This is my tiny attacher. This isn't one I've got out of the warehouse. This is mine. It's my constant companion. It's an old friend. It's my go-to. It's been all over Europe, this one. So we'll pop that there. Then I think I'm going to get this snowflake. I'm just going to slide that underneath like so, not all the way in. Let's get it at a slight angle like that. And again, you can use glue. You can use a hot glue gun. It doesn't really matter, whatever your preference. I'm going to go with the tiny attacher. Now, next up, I want to get this somewhere around there. But this time, because I don't want to destroy that lovely emboss, I am going to go with my Sizzix hot glue gun. I'm going to apply a strip of glue down there before putting it at a very slight angle. Thus, ticket. Let's have that coming out, maybe somewhere like that. Again, tiny attacher. Next up, my lovely finding. So see how it's all coming together. See how it's coming together as a composition. Hot glue, always a good way to apply these. And we'll have that there. Don't worry about this extra twine coming off. I like that vibe, I really do, I really do. So, my tweezers, this is where my tweezers come in handy because I don't want to get my fingers too close to this hot glue gun for obvious reasons. Well folks, you're going to be here on the day that Pete forgets to bring an extra glue stick, but never mind, I'm actually pushing it in from the back with my fingertip. How could I forget an extra glue stick, Josh? What's going on here? This isn't supposed to happen. There we are. And again, you see I'm putting my finger in there and I'm just popping a little bit of glue. Like so. How about there? That's a good place. There we are. And that, folks, that's almost done. All that it leaves me to do is to take our base card, and remember, all the ivory card, it started off this colour before applying those inks. Now you can put this at a slight angle or you can put it straight. I'm going to put it straight today for once. We'll pop that on there. Place it, oh, you know what the heck, let's use my tiny attacher. And there we have it. That is the finished piece, my friends. Didn't take long to do. Lots of funky techniques going on there. We've got the lovely gilding wax going in. We've got our distress inks using 2 different ways. Very limited colour palettes, some nice glittery elements, some twine, and everything else that goes with it. And that's Idea-ology. That is Stampers Anonymous. It's Ranger Inks. And of course, Sizzix. Now, if you want to see the range that we have, then go to the website, check out the Tim Holtz Hub, see everything that we've got. We will be adding to this over time. Thank you very much for joining me today. I really enjoyed that.